Hey everyone, we're just letting you know that today's discussion may contain topics that some people might find distressing. If you are affected by some of the things that we discuss and you want to seek out sources of support, look down below in the link and the description where we'll be offering those to you.
Hi, I'm Luanda Yasmin.
I'm Anissa.
And my name's Sophie Hannah, and I want to welcome you to episode 25 of Ethnically Speaking, the show where we discuss everything affecting the UK's highly melanated communities, from current affairs to pop culture and everything in between. We always keep it 100, which means you know we're going to keep it real with you today as we talk about banning porn websites, cancelling black platforms that aren't owned by black people, stopping the stigma surrounding miscarriages, and living in the shadow of our parents. First up is Luanda. Girl, let's talk about that porn.
Yes, let's. So, the government in Thailand has banned Pornhub and 190 other porn websites. So after that, of course, there was so many protests and there was a really large online backlash. But what I wanted to ask the two of you was, are there any positives to porn, or should we ban it here in the UK as well?
I think it's, personally for me, it's tough to answer. I don't feel like I've done enough research methods to know if it's positive or not, or what the positivities would be. One thing I did read was that a lot of people use it for educational purposes, and then I kind of understood it in that matter. Because I think it was last week when I said to you guys, was it last week? Maybe it was the week before. I can't remember what we were talking about, and I said, oh, well, in my secondary school, we didn't have sex education. They just taught you how to, how you gave birth, and that was it. So I can imagine being a teenager and being curious and being like, well, how does it work? Especially if you haven't had adequate sex education, and then your parents are not telling you. I can imagine being like, well, I want to see what's happening, and going on the internet and having a look. So I kind of understand it for educational purposes, but then in the same caveat, I don't think porn's realistic, so I don't know how far you'd go. Whether they should ban it or not, it's once again kind of like the drug thing. Because I'm not a partaker, it's very hard for me to say whether it should be banned or not, or whether, because it wouldn't affect me if it was banned. So I don't know. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, once they've banned it, what are going to be the consequences, what will be so detrimental, and then I can say, maybe then it'll be too late, but then maybe I could say, oh, maybe it shouldn't have been banned. So that's where I stand. It could be banned and it wouldn't have no fuss on me. But maybe others can tell me why it shouldn't be banned.
I mean, I'm probably not the person to tell you, because I don't think that there are positives to porn. I'm going to put that out there. I just feel like porn takes away the intimacy of real relationships. I don't think it's about fostering good relationships personally. I don't actually think it's about sexual experiences either. I think it's very much a show, an act, a performance. And I just don't think, I think it does more harm than it does good. So that would be my idea on it. Whether I think it should be banned, yeah, I guess, but it's never going to be. So we've let Pandora out of the box. So it's here to stay. But I'm not really, I think it does more harm than good. Let me say that.
I mean, I definitely think there are so many negatives to porn, but I actually don't think it should be banned. The thing that bothers me the most actually is, Anissa, is the thing that you were considering. You were like, okay, but maybe people use it for education. That's the thing that bothers me the most about porn, that people use it for sex education, because the majority of porn is misleading and it's damaging and it aids rape culture. But even after listing all of those things, I still don't think it should be banned, because if a government bans porn, it's kind of like essentially saying that sex is something sinful, something shameful, something to hide. Whereas I think, we should maybe just try to rework it so that it's healthier, because right now it's through the perspective of the male gaze, the straight white male gaze. And there's just, like I said, there's a lot of things wrong with it. But if you were to ban porn, I dread to think what would happen to the sex industry workers. Like there's already so many laws that make their practice unsafe for them. And I think that would just double or triple if we were to ban porn, because like Sophie said, like even if we banned it, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be banned. If we're being completely honest, all of us have, whether we choose to or not, but all of us have access to things that are illegal. The only difference is when you make something illegal is that you have to put yourself in more danger to acquire it. So if you were to ban porn, it doesn't mean that sex workers are going to stop being sex workers. They're just going to be put in more danger to do their job.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like, that's why I'm saying it's like when they had prohibition in America and they banned alcohol and deaths increased because people were trying to make their own alcohol through all sorts of different methods, and it was very unsafe. So legalizing it means that you can have regulation. So I definitely get that. But something that you said that I thought was really interesting, Lawanda, is that if we ban porn, then it's going to make sex seem like it's something dirty and that should be kept hidden. But are we then saying on the reverse that sex is something that should be us viewing strangers having sex, and that isn't, is it? I don't know if the word's inappropriate, but that's something we should be seeing. Like, because isn't there other ways that we can celebrate sex without porn?
Yes, but my issue is that everyone is going to be naturally curious. Everyone's going to be curious at some point in their life. Most likely, like if you're not, there's avid porn users, of course, but the first time you're going to be curious is when you're like not a child, or like a teenager going through puberty or something like that, right? And I think these kind of curiosities they shouldn't be suppressed. And they shouldn't be suppressed because our government said so. And so when you have something that even it should be a little bit more normalized, you should allow to be interested in sex and how it works and things that happen. But when you're looking for that sex education, you should be receiving something that's a lot healthier than what Pornhub is right now. That's how I feel. So I just think it should be fixed, not completely eradicated.
Yeah. I think, yeah, okay. Because I understood Sophie's question to you. I kind of understand your answer. And then I'm like on the fence because I think I hear what you're saying. I'm trying to make this make sense. My brain is so fuzzy. Like with what you've said, right? About them getting education and getting it from the right places and not being regulated. I completely understand that, but I don't think porn is the place to do it. I think like now with technology, we have so many like podcasts or shows or helplines or, sex shops where you can have sex toys. Like, I feel like there's so many ways to express yourself healthily in a sexual way. And I think porn, I can't speak because I'm not a partaker, but I can't imagine porn being a healthy way for me to express myself sexually. So I know I can't, with it, us banning it, saying that sex is shameful, and dirty, I feel like, doesn't porn make sex dirty and shameful? Because this is something you usually do in your closed room by yourself, whether it's late at night, in the day, I don't know what time people like to do these things here, but
all times of the day.
Exactly, you lock yourself away, and it's just you and the laptop and yourself, or whatever the setup is. Like, to me, that's like the hidden, dirty, shameful kind of sex versus like, I was just listening to this sex podcast and blah blah blah. Like, do you know what I mean by that? I feel like my brain is fuzzy.
I think that's a very good point, because as much as we can say that sex is something that should be out in the open, which I agree with. I don't think that there should be any secrets around sex. But like you said, it's not like people are getting together to watch porn together and are just like, let's watch it. Yeah, let's get some tips. This is really great. Like it, and I don't know if that's, I don't want to say people should have shame in watching porn in terms of they should be watching it in secret, because if somebody does have a problem, and let's be very clear, there's only like 5% of people who watch porn who are going to become addicts. So we're not saying it's the greater majority, but we don't want people to be afraid to come forward. But I think agree in terms of what you're saying, Anissa, that the porn industry doesn't, in my opinion, make sex something something to celebrate. Let me say that. And a lot of people say that men have unrealistic expectations about women's bodies because they watch porn or what sex should be like. And as Lawanda said earlier, with people going to it for education, there was a study in the newspaper that said 55% of men that they surveyed said they use it for sex education. And that's just a scary number because it's not real. Like, these women aren't having 10 orgasms. Like, they're not enjoying being thrown down and having their head held down. Like, the lines around consent are very blurred.
This is what I'm talking about.
Like, all these stuff just make me feel like, ban it. But whatever. That's me.
Okay, so I don't think that, I'm not saying that, porn is like, it makes us celebrate sex and it's so amazing. I'm saying when you ban something, you have to think about what that action is saying to your community, what that action is saying to your society. When you're banning something, you're saying this thing is bad. I don't want you to do it, and I don't want you to do it so much so that I'm going to make it illegal. So if you do it, you're going to get punished. So now we're going to see people in jail just because they wanted to click on a video of a double D. Like, I think it's just getting ridiculous. And you guys know, with almost everything that we've discussed, my number one thing is going to be freedom of choice. So I don't think that a government should have say in what's going on in your private space. And we all talked about, okay, but what if you want to take your laptop, you want to be private and stuff like that? If you ban porn, it's then going to not be private because you're probably going to have to put in your details to get into some site, and it's going to be all scammy, and you're going to get a virus on your computer and things like that. But I think the biggest issue with porn, I do have a problem that with people using it for sex education, and I do have a problem with the amount of rape culture that is in there. So instead of focusing on like binning it, which wouldn't actually bin it, like we've all admitted, it would just throw it underground. Instead of focusing on that, we should maybe think about how we can have that displayed in a healthier way, because like Sophie said, the lines between consent and non-consensual relations are very blurred, and it's gross. And like I mentioned before, it's through the perspective of like the white male gaze. So you're going to have like Pamela Anderson looking sex workers when it's just not realistic for the people that you have in your environment. So I don't know. I just think instead of throwing it away, like, why don't we make improvements? Because people don't just use it for education, people use it for pleasure, and people aren't going to stop using it for pleasure, whether or not they're addicted.
Sophia, you
go. No, because I wanted to say something, but I saw you wanted to say something.
Go. No, honestly, Sophia, you felt like you jump and go. Because I saw this and I was like, what? I didn't understand what was going on.
That's me trying not to speak over anybody. So there was this article that I read that was really interesting, and as you were saying, Lawanda, and as I thought before I really delved into this topic, like, people are watching porn for education or for sexual pleasure. I thought, you watch it because you want to enjoy yourself. But they were saying some of the other reasons why that ranked quite highly was boredom and coping with stress and trying to find something to distract you. And I think that there's a wider issue if these things are ranking up there with watching porn for sexual enjoyment. Because if people are watching this because they're trying to get away from their problems or because they're bored, for me, I feel like there's a bigger lack going on there, that people feel like this is what they need to turn to, or they're lonely, let me turn to watch porn. So I think that I think that's with anything that we can overdo and overuse. So whether that's alcohol or drugs or food or social media or porn, when we get into the place that we're using this to fill a gap within our lives, then I think that there's an issue. And I think it's a very easy gap to fill because it's kind of like, it's just a bit of fun. But I don't think any of those things that I've mentioned, if you use them in excess, they're harmful. And I think that's why I think it's a little dangerous to say, because I was thinking about this, and it's something that probably like my friends talk about a lot, this idea that when we say, it's not hurting anybody, so therefore we should be allowed to do it. But I'm like, it is hurting somebody. It's usually hurting the person who's doing it. But nowadays it's kind of like, well, if what I'm doing doesn't hurt another person, then it's okay. But what about the toll it's taking on the people who are doing it consistently to escape their problems?
I think that kind of raises a wider issue, because I think there's so many things that people turn to in general, like you just mentioned, social media and television and all those things, where they're trying to fill a gap or because they're bored. We also turn to food to eat. Like most of the time when we eat, we don't actually eat because we're hungry, we eat because we're bored and we don't have anything else to do. And also with the way that like sex is presented to us, it's supposed to be this like fun thing. So sometimes there are going to be people who are like, oh, I'm bored, what should I do? I'll go out on the weekend and have a one night stand. Or, oh, I'm bored, what should I do? I'll be on Instagram for 2 hours. Or, oh, I'm bored, what should I do? I'll eat Chiquitos and like watch Netflix. Do you know what I mean? So I think that maybe I think like it's a different conversation that doesn't directly stem from porn. It stems from like us not knowing what to do with ourselves when we feel lethargic, like when we're uninterested. And that's not porn's fault. That's not social media's fault. That's something that we need to work on internally.
So what about the other ones? Because I wasn't just talking about boredom, like as a way to deal with stress or a way to distract yourself from things that are going on in your life. Like not just boredom, because I'm saying anything that we use to stop the gap of not being able to deal with what's going on, then there's an issue. So, but I don't know if we've got time to talk about this, but I just wanted to say there are positives. There are some people who say there are positives to porn. There was a study that was done by Cosmo, and women said that it helped them to become aroused more easier and to tell their boyfriends or their partners what they wanted in the bedroom. So my opinion is I don't think there's any positives, but there are people out there who do believe there are positives to porn.
Well, speaking of things that have been popping off on the internet, an Instagram handle called @IndependentBlackBusinesses, which has been doing the most for Black businesses recently, has recently come under fire because their owner and manager of the site, Helen, has revealed that she is a white woman. So the people who have been following this handle are angry because they say that Helen has been deliberately hiding her race. And of course, in 2020, we have been saying to our white allies that they need to support the Black community. So now I want to ask you, is it appropriate for white people to own platforms that are for Black people? And if you think it's not appropriate, then are you willing to cancel bigger Black platforms like Beáta?
Oh, so yeah, I think it's okay for white people to own these brands, to be honest. That might be the unpopular opinion. I think it is okay because I think I see it going both ways. Because if we're saying that someone who is white or not Black can't be the head of a Black platform, are we then saying that a Black person can't be head of a platform that majority is for the indigenous Englishmen? Because there's someone like Edward Einful, who is like the editor of Vogue. Now, he doesn't own it. It's owned by Condé Nast brand, but he's the editor of it. Are we saying because, well, it's really white people that buy it, he shouldn't be the head of it? I think it's probably a dangerous precedent to set, to say that if you're not Black, you can't do it. But I think that there definitely needs to be a lot of Black buy-in, a lot of people that you're working with, partnering with, so that you understand the culture that you're really trying to serve. Because if you're bringing capital to a project as a white person, then maybe that's the reason why there isn't a Black person heading it. If they have the money, but then they want to bring in other people who have the passion, I think it's all right. But what I will say though, in terms of cancelling, I've already told you ladies, I'm not really here for cancelling in 2020. I think too many things get cancelled. So perhaps we can cancel things, but if they're creating opportunities for real opportunities, it's not tokenism, they're not exploiting people, but they're providing real opportunities to people within the community, then no, I'm not going to cancel those big brands.
Yeah, because I saw this on Instagram when she revealed that she was really white, and it was so funny. I can't, honestly, it brings me to laughter even every time I think about it, because it's literally like, I'm so sorry if people are misled, and there's like this picture of her like with a coffee cup. It kills me every time I think about it, because it's so funny. It's so funny.
She was in the wrong. She was in the wrong. She's using Black emoticons. She was in the wrong. I'm not defending her. So I just want to make that clear.
Listen, I don't think she was ill-intended, but she's a joker. That's all I thought when I think, my God, you are such a joker. It literally cracked me up. But I do agree with Sophie in that I am not going to throw all my toys out the pram if I find out that a company whose audience is mainly Black people is owned by white people, because most of the time I understand what business is like. It may have been started by a black person, but it just got acquired by a bigger, larger company, white company, or went public and board members changed, blah, 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 like whatever goes on with business. So I'm not fussed. I think for me, it's just making sure that the intention is still there behind the product. Like, what was the intention for making this and specifically targeting it towards the black audience? And then also making sure that not only the intention is there, but it is, I guess, true and authentic is the best way to explain it. The best way is authentic. Because for me, like with BET for a particular, like, okay, that was started by a black man. Now it's owned by Viacom, which is obviously a white-owned company. However, their programming is still mainly black. So it still feels like the intention what they had intended to do in the beginning is still there. And it still feels authentic. Like, it still feels like BET. My issue comes in when I feel as if companies that are anything that's targeted towards a black audience that is run by white counterparts is when it feels more like their version of us. Like, does that make sense? Versus our own narrative. Like, for me, months ago, I was talking to my friend, whatever, we were talking about Top Boy and arguably people would say, okay, that's something of black culture because it's mainly black cast. And he was like, oh yeah, he loves Top Boy, blah, blah, blah. And I like Top Boy. I watched it. It was all good. However, when I told him that actually Top Boy was written by a white man, he lost all his marbles. He was like, what? I was like, yeah, like, didn't you know the white guy, he just went down to Hackney, spoke to a few gangsters, got an understanding of their origin story and stuff, and then he pulled it together as a script and wrote Top Boy. And then he he honestly lost his marbles. And I was like, you didn't know this? Because he's watching this story and thinking, oh yeah, like this relates to my story or whatever, or the black experience, but he doesn't understand that this is a black experience that was written through a white lens. And that made him go, oh, I'm never watching Top Boy again. And I was thinking, but you've been watching all these years, you've been fine. So like for me, I'm still going to be watching Top Boy because I understood already what it was. But for others, I think it's difficult being able to accept that my narrative as a black person is being controlled by a white counterpart, especially if I think it is only celebrating things that are not completely true to me. So that's why I can see why some people are outraged about my girl being white and using the black emoticons, because that was a bit wild. But I'm with Sophie. I don't think things should be cancelled. I think, sometimes you just have to have a better look at things and then decide what part of the fence you want to sit on.
Okay, I have so much to say, but I'm gonna just because you guys just
I thought you would. I'm not gonna lie. So.
No, but I did before you guys spoke, but now I have two more things to say, but I'm just gonna ease it in. Let me just tell you how I feel about the Helen situation first, and then in a bit I'll respond to what you guys have said. But I just think her situation, Helen, who created the independent black businesses, that situation, like so many other situations, just needed transparency. Like, it literally just needed transparency. When I read the post about her being, how she's grown since the backlash, to be honest, I was here for it. I was like, okay, cool. She understands where she went wrong. And then, I clicked on the link tree. And I saw that there was options to be a Patreon where you donate money per month. And then she also had a link to her PayPal account. And next to both of these links, there were the words saying, all of the money that you donate will go back into the platform. We intend to normalise buying at black businesses. So now I'm thinking, okay, Helen, okay. So if you intend to normalise buying at black businesses, wouldn't it then be more effective for you as a white woman to be openly buying at these places? And so because of that, I'm thinking one of two things are happening. The first thing that could be happening is that you could subconsciously be thinking that black platforms are for black people only, which would explain the black hand emojis, because you're thinking people who want to shop at black businesses are black people, and that's a subconscious thought. That's why you made those mistakes. Or on the flip side, you could be consciously thinking, I won't be financially supported if people know that I'm white. So there's two ways that it could be going, and the money was the thing that made me think that way, and I think the money is the thing that makes people the most mad, because then we're talking about a profit, right? In terms of what you said, Sophie, because you said like, oh well, you know, she can own this platform if we can have a black editor-in-chief at Vogue.
No. But I said I don't agree with Helen whatsoever. Let me be very clear. I said I feel
people
like
can
Helen
own
is
black
bugging.
platforms in general if there can be black people who own platforms that you gave an example, which is Vogue. But the difference is that what we're supposed to be aiming to do is make shopping at black businesses, make the consumers of black businesses as diverse as mainstream businesses. Like, there aren't black businesses and white businesses. There are like black businesses and then mainstream businesses, because actually everyone buys Vogue. There's Vogue Africa, there's Vogue, you know, UK, there's Vogue in every places of the world. And so mainstream consumers are diverse, but consumers of black businesses are actually, they just tend to be more black. So I just think, if in my mind, after I read the words that Helen put on the website when she said, we intend to normalise buying at black businesses, if that is true, then I think something that would aid that normalisation is her setting an example to other white people by openly shopping at these places, because someone who sees a black owned business is going to just presume that it's for black people exclusively. And that's the thing that we need to be changing.
I agree with that.
I'm not sure of the bit where I wasn't really sure what your point was in relation to what I was saying. Because in terms of like the Vogue thing, like there is Vogue in other countries, but if it's going to be Vogue India, chances are it's going to be someone who's Indian. Vogue America is held by Anne. Forgot what her name is. Anna Wintour. So if it's in another country, Japan, those people are the heads. I'm saying someone who is black in a predominantly white country being the head of it, if you see what I mean.
I do, but again, like, these places like the UK and the USA, they're diverse. Like, if we go into Tesco, we're not thinking, who owns Tesco? It doesn't matter, because you'll see black people there, you'll see brown people there, you'll see white people there. But then if you have a shop that is a food store that is owned by a black person, maybe white people and brown people are going to think that it's not for them. Do you see the difference? So for me, it's not like there aren't, like, I mean, I'm sure that there are, but we're not talking about companies that have created something specifically for white people. Like, we're talking about mainstream companies, and the consumers of mainstream companies are diverse. And what we need to be doing is diversifying the consumers of black businesses. And so I'm saying Helen had a chance to do that by being a white woman who was openly like, yeah, let's shop at this place and this place and this place, and showing other white people who follow her and white people who respect her, white people who are her families, that this is just another business and you can be shopping here, instead of thinking it's made by black people, only black people are going to be interested. Because I can't think of another reason why she would be using black emojis unless she subconsciously thought this is for black people.
I guess for me, like, I don't even know if I'm really saying something completely different, because I think in terms of the question in regards to is it okay for someone to, I guess for me, I'm just saying, if we're expecting people, like, and I agree with what you're saying, brands should just be open to everybody. Unfortunately, it's not like that, because as you said it again, if it's owned by a black person, people assume, oh, it must just be for black people. But I'm just saying, I don't think that it should be one race should be the head of something, if it's black owned, or if it's like an Asian Goya beans in America, which is Spanish. Well, if it's a Spanish bean, then only Spanish people should be at the head of it. I'm saying I just don't agree with that. So I don't know if I'm saying something different, but I understand your angle.
Yeah, and that reminded me, actually, because that what you said, Anissa, about how your friend was kind of like surprised because he was like, okay, so now my narrative is being told by a white person, and that was like hurtful and confusing to him. So through that lens, like, I understand why people might have an issue with it, because our representation is so fragile, because it aids so many other things in our lives. And so I think that we're sitting here and we're open and we're like, hey man, so long as we can have a seat at your table, you can come and eat with us. When I actually don't think the attitudes are as inclusive on the flip side, if that makes sense. So that's maybe where I feel like,
So do you mean, are you basically saying that, like, we're saying with our Black businesses, we don't mind to have white counterparts come in and run it, but maybe our white counterparts they're not as open for us to come in and run it.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Because look how...
I agree with you.
And remind me of his name, Sophie, the editor of Vogue. The guy,
Edward. He's the first black editor of this one.
Yeah. He was the first in like 2018, 2019. So with us, it's like we're working so hard. We're trying to push down these barriers. We're trying to break through these ceilings just to have one in all of the years that Vogue has been running. Vogue US has been running for 127 years. That's one. Do you know what I mean? And then so on the flip side, I understand why people think, okay, well, we always say if we can't have a seat at the table, we're going to make our own table. And then people walk over to the other table and they're like, even this one that is supposed to be for me is controlled by someone else. So I understand people's reservations. I'm still on board with everyone being involved in everything, but I don't think that the playing fields are even right now. So I understand why people have an issue with it.
Yeah, I don't think the playing fields, I don't think it's level ground at all. And the thing I would probably say is for these black platforms, or if you call yourself a black platform, or if you call yourself a black business, then we as black people need to get out and support it, because it's no good us creating our own tables and things like that if people aren't gonna buy in. Because a lot of times it's like, start it, but it's kind of like, actually, I'm gonna need the support of the community to get this started, because if people only see me as a black brand, you're first going to have to probably build yourself up within the community before you can even start to mainstream. So yeah, buy black.
But I think that's another issue, Sophie, because then people want to intentionally be buying black and then they find out that they're actually not. Because we're talking about where we spent. We know now, we're smart enough to know that every click, every show that you watch, everything that you buy, it goes to a wider purpose. And so now people are trying to be intentional with where they put their money. And so people are trying to be like, this is, a black-owned business. Let me watch BET. Or this is a black-owned platform. Let me follow independent black businesses. And then they find out afterwards, or like, let me watch Top Boy. They find out afterwards that it's not. And then But
I think that's where it comes back to your point, Luanda, about I think if there's more transparency, then hopefully it wouldn't spark as much outrage.
Yeah, transparency is key. Everyone just be transparent, because I'm here for Helen. Like, run your business, run your platform, but just be a white woman running it. Don't be a faceless Instagram. Just, do you know what I mean? Like, I think it does more. I think.
Yes. No, I'm just not here for Helen, guys. I'm sorry. The emoticons is where she lost me. She lost me.
I don't think I honestly don't think she was ill intent. I just think she just was confused at best. Honestly, I don't think it was ill intent. I really don't.
Sophie's face.
I just... Guys, I'm sorry for Helen. I ain't got nothing else to say. Let's just move on.
Well, we've reached our halfway point. So if you like what you have seen so far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Let us know if you agree with us. Is Helen yay, nay? Make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. So far, we have spoken about whether we should ban pornography or if we should cancel black businesses that are actually run by white people. I want to talk about something that I saw actually this past week. So in a Thanksgiving opinion piece for the New York Times, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, shared that she miscarried her second child earlier this year. So in the UK, it's actually estimated that 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, yet the subject is still kind of seen as a taboo, with many women feeling like they need to hide their experiences or their feelings from the world. My question for you ladies is, why do you think women feel a sense of shame when they miscarry, and how do we support them and open up the conversation to reduce this stigma?
I'll take the first question first. I think we would feel a sense of shame because we feel like we've done something wrong. We would feel like there's something wrong with us, like we're broken. And because people don't speak about it that much, people who have had miscarriages don't understand how unfortunately common they are. I read a statistic that said that 25% of pregnancies end in a miscarriage. And in addition to that, as a woman, there is so much emphasis on this function of our body. When you're a child, you're given a pram and a baby doll as toys, and we are socially conditioned to believe that this ability is what we're most valued for. So it's definitely difficult because of those things as well. But I also think that we need to just be a little bit more open, and we need to talk about it for what it is, because so many people feel shame around it. So many people feel like they're broken and they're not. I mean, I read something by someone called Zoe Williams, who wrote an article for The Guardian, and I'm going to attempt to quote her because she said something that's really important. She said, Miscarriage culture from a feminist perspective is the amplification of the shame that's already attached to being female. She said, motherhood, like miscarriages, is the territory on which you find that there's nothing more embarrassing than holding the female apparatus than if you were to hold it wrongly. So, like I said, we need to speak about miscarriages and think of them for what they are. They're medical issues. They're not a sign that you failed, and they're not a sign that you're broken.
I think I would add to that as well. I think anything, and funnily enough, it makes me think about the conversation we was having about porn earlier in the show. Like anything that is secret or taboo, we assume that there's shame surrounding it. So if you're not allowed to talk about it at the dinner table, or if you're like, oh, I can't talk about this around my mum, or it's kind of like, oh, there's something wrong with what I'm talking about. And I think because we don't talk about miscarriages as openly as we should, then there feels like there should be something shameful or something that should be kept secret about it. And I think also, again, the fact that women's bodies are so shrouded in secrecy in general. Like, we've talked about it on the show. Like, we don't openly hear people talking about periods. We don't openly hear women talking about orgasms. We don't openly hear women talking about their sexual desires. And then what you're doing is shrouding the body in secrecy, usually something to do with sex or your reproductive organs or your vagina or whatever. And then you're then adding on this layer of your body, which you have used sexually to become pregnant. And then the pregnancy that was planned doesn't continue. It just adds another layer of like, oh, well, there's already all these secretly things that we can't talk about a woman's body. And I think this just really compounds it. And I think it's such a lonely place. I know a lot of women who have had miscarriages, friends, family. Some were knocked out by it. Some were happy because they were like, actually, I didn't want the child and I wasn't ready. Like, there is such a very wide opinion about it, but by not allowing these conversations, we don't allow people who are going to go through it to know that you're not alone. This is unique to you, but you shouldn't feel like there's no one you can talk to who hasn't also experienced this.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Sophie, and I think it's that exact sentiment that you said. There's lots of different reactions to having a miscarriage, and I think there needs to be a space, if you will, or a conversation that allows for everyone's perspective, because I think it's just like one of those things. It's kind of like, how people sometimes shame you for the way that you grieve? It's that kind of thing. It's like they shame you for the way that you deal with a miscarriage. So some people will be like, wow, you really got over that really quickly. And then they're just like, wow, you didn't want the baby? Like that kind of thing. Or some people are like, well, you were only like 4 weeks, so why are you taking the loss so hard? And so I think we need to have that space open for every perspective of the woman who miscarries. I read actually, though, a lot of women feel shame about their miscarriage experience is because they feel like they're not allowed to grieve because it wasn't a baby at 9 months, or because they didn't push it out because it was still growing in them or still a fetus. It's like they're almost not allowed to basically still be as upset if it was a child that was right in front of them. And that actually made me feel really sad, because I was just kind of like, there's no way in this world that anybody could tell me that even if I had created something and it grew in me for 1 second, that I'm not allowed to cry about it for 25 years if I didn't want to. Do you know what I mean? But I think a lot of the time, that's what the kind of culture is. So that's why when I read it, they said basically you feel shameful because you feel like you're almost not allowed to grieve. And I think that's where we need to start having a lot of open conversations about it. And I've been hearing women speaking about it more openly. Obviously, I had read Meghan Markle's interview, and I was listening to one of the podcasts that I listened to called Girls No Filter. Anyway, one of the women, she opened up, basically this year she's had 3 miscarriages, right? So she's had them back to back to back. And she was just like, she just felt like she couldn't tell anyone, that she wasn't allowed to. And she felt like basically her body had betrayed her. Like this one thing that her body is meant to do, it just didn't do it. And she couldn't reconcile with that. And it was really hard for her to even articulate that to her husband, because he's obviously grieving with the loss, but it's in a different way. And so, yes, I feel like conversation needs to be open, but it's so difficult because you don't know, like, I don't even know where to start. I've lost my train of thought. I don't know what to start.
No, I think you said... No, go ahead. I don't have anything to say. I was just going to say that you said a lot of important things, Anissa.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I think one place that we could start, I mean, we always talk about education, guys. Of course, I'm going to say education again. But also, I think there really needs to be trained practitioners who are going to talk to women before pregnancy, if you're trying to get pregnant, or at the start of your pregnancy. And I think it's probably a very, very difficult conversation to gauge, because obviously people are going to feel like, well, I don't want the stress of thinking about that, or I don't want to feel like you've talked me. My fate has now been decided now that you've had this conversation with me. But doctors do tell you, probably don't tell people for the first few months, because there's a high risk of having a miscarriage in the first trimester, the first 3 months. And I think the danger with that, from what I was reading, because I never even thought about it, they were saying, when you say don't tell anyone for the first 3 months, you already put in a layer of secrecy around miscarriage. So it's kind of like, oh, because you don't want to tell anyone if you miscarriage, don't even tell anyone that you're pregnant. And they were saying, well, actually, if people were able to say things, not you are able, but if people are more encouraged to say as soon as they got pregnant, I'm pregnant, if miscarriages happen, then they'll be much more open and in the public forum, because we're like, it happens regularly and therefore we've created a space to talk about it. But I think practitioners should be talking about this with women, because I think the women that I know that have had miscarriages, the ones who have been really knocked by it, one of the biggest things that they've always said is, I didn't know it happened to so many people. I didn't know that it was 1 in 4. I didn't know that, 1 in 8 people have a difficulty getting pregnant. I didn't know that it's like, we don't know these facts. So then you feel even more so, there must be something specifically wrong with me, because I'm seeing all these babies, and there are a lot of babies out there. I see all these babies not realizing that the baby is the physical proof that you have gone to full term, or that you've had a premature baby. That's the physical proof. But when there is no physical proof, no one knows. No one understands. No one makes an allowance for, actually, there could have been something there that might have not been visible. But because you haven't seen it now after 9 to 10 months, then suddenly, well, we don't need to talk about that. We're only going to celebrate the ones that are here. So it's just very muddled. We really have to go back to the start with this.
Yeah, I think so as well. That was, again, something that I hadn't thought about before reading up on this, because I just thought it was just like, the general rule. We don't talk about your pregnancy until after 3 months, just the general rule. I thought there was a girl that I know that got pregnant, and she was telling everyone when she thought she was pregnant, first of all, before it was even confirmed. And then one of my friends said, you really shouldn't, not to her, said it about her, that she really shouldn't be telling people before she's at least 3 months along. And then I thought, oh, so is she, because she was happy as Larry. And by the way, she's had a happy and healthy baby, so she's all good.
Oh,
but,
God.
That made me think, because someone said that, and I thought oh, so is she being irresponsible? You're not supposed to do that? And then I thought in my mind, okay, so then when I get pregnant, I'm going to have to wait however long to tell. Do you know what I mean? So again, reading up on how that adds to it, that adds to the secrecy of miscarriages and adds to the shame. I just, because we don't talk about it often enough, we don't know what else is contributing to it. So that's why, again, like I keep saying, these conversations need to be happening, not just with medical professionals, but just with everyone.
But I think we also need to look at the medical professionals in this, like with the education. I think they play they have a big piece in it for me as well. And like, obviously I talk about all the time, I've mentioned it several times, like I hate the way we medicalize the female reproductive organs. I hate it. I say it to you guys all the time. I could go to the doctors with a broken toe and they make me do a pregnancy test. Like, it drives me up the freaking wall. And it's, for me, it's basically them telling me that when I'm here, the only possible reason why I would need to see a doctor is if I have a baby. And the only thing my body can respond to, the only thing that can go wrong, the only thing that can go right is if I'm having this baby, and it winds me up. So when obviously doctors say, oh, you shouldn't say before 3 months, I agree with Sophie that it's definitely embedded in shame. I think that thing, it is, for me, I think it's embedded in shame, because you're basically saying that if I walk out here and say to people, I'm 1 week pregnant and it fails, then I should feel shameful or attach shame because I wasn't able to get it past the quote unquote safe mark. And that, for me, it isn't right. Like, if I'm meant to have the baby, I'm going to have the baby. So I should tell anybody I want to tell about the baby. And I think it's what happens after the miscarriage, right? Because for a lot of women, when they think they're miscarrying, sometimes when you call the doctors or whatever, they'll tell you to just wait it out at home. Do you know how horrible that is, to wait that out at home as you watch your child bleed out of your body? It's a horrible thing. And what's not followed up is, like, they make sure you go to the hospital, you get your checkup. But for me, it's the trauma, it's the emotional trauma afterwards. It's like, why are we not giving these women referrals, like, to speak to someone? Why are we not checking up? Why are we not doing a 3-month post-check to see if they have some sort of depression or some sort of mental health thing? Because you can't lose a child and then all the doctor does is check on me physically, but doesn't give me any space to work through my emotion, or process it. And it's a traumatic experience. And obviously I think postpartum has now become a big thing, and doctors are finally stepping in to really help recognise that. But I think we also need to step in now when women have miscarriages and say, you know, it's not just enough to give you physical help, but we need to give you mental help as well to make sure you're covered on all bases.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it changes so much. Like, if you're in a couple, like, I remember watching a show, actually. I don't know if have you guys seen Friends from College? No. On Netflix. Okay, it's like a sitcom show. It's really funny. It's a comedy. But these couple, they're trying to get pregnant, and they're trying everything and it keeps failing. And then they had one that was really close and they lost the baby and it didn't happen. And the woman fell into the deepest depression, and the husband was kind of like unsure of how to help, didn't know what to do. And when they finally had their like blowout argument, she was mad because she was like, I don't understand. Why aren't you sad? It's like, I'm the only person that's sad and you're not. I just don't get it. So there's so many things, because obviously I think in that situation he was trying to he was thinking, I need to be strong for her, and she's thinking, why aren't you being sad with me? Because I know that would just mess me up on every level, and I wouldn't apologize for it either. But I think I just think we need to expand our like empathy to also everyone who was involved with 100%. Creating the baby. Yeah, because people don't, I'm done.
And I was just going to say, like, on that, like, people grieve differently, and people just need to be, we all need to be aware. And if you're someone who's gone through it, like, there are different experiences. I did a bereavement course when I worked at the NHS some years ago, because I did a lot of work with babies, and I had to go on this bereavement course for if your child had died. And they were saying a lot of couples can break up because the men will be like, okay, let's repaint their room. Let's go on holiday. And the woman's like, I know, I want to sit in the grief. And they're saying a man's thing would be like, people try to move on in different ways. And I think it's very important to see that's the reason why we need to be talking about these things more, because like you're saying, Lwanda, in that program, you could be having a different reaction, not realizing actually he's grieving or he's going through it in his own way. But if we never talk about it, you just might feel like he's just leaving me to deal with this alone. So I really hope people I really hope we talk about it more, and that we allow people to come and talk to us about it, and don't freeze up and make them feel any worse than some women do by going through this.
Yeah. It's not an easy conversation to have by any means, but I find sometimes that when people are grieving or have a traumatic experience, it's better to just be a listening ear versus a talking mouth. But just
so true.
And just listen, and to just let them say as much as they want to say, scream as much as they want to scream, and and just be there to support on.
100%.
So unfortunately, talking about the loss of children, we're moving on to another loss of a child. Bobby Brown Jr., the son of R&B singer Bobby Brown, tragically died last week. A close friend of his has said he may have partied too hard, but the added pressure of him having to live up to his father, obviously Bobby Brown, may have contributed. Do you guys think there is too much pressure on kids to live up to the success or the achievements of their parents? And do you think that pressure is worse for kids of celebrity parents? And how can kids avoid being compared to their parents?
Girl, that's a lot of questions.
That is a lot. It's a lot to unpack.
I'm going to try and
choose which one you want to get first.
I'm going to start from the top. Okay, so do I think there's a lot of pressure? I think it depends on the parent, honestly. On how much their child feels the pressure. And with celebrity parents, I think that's even more compounded. But I think it really, because I think there's situations where not parents have gotten it wrong, but where the child has probably gone a bit more off the rails. So like Robert Downey Jr.'s son ended up in rehab. Michael Douglas's son ended up in rehab. But for every one of those examples, you've got ones of children that are probably a bit more well-adjusted, such as like Gwyneth Paltrow, who was a child of someone famous, and Meryl Streep's daughter, people who have made it work and people who feel like they probably haven't been as successful with their children. So I think the pressure really depends. In terms of, is it bad for...
Is it worse pressure for kids with celebrity parents?
Yeah, I answered that. What was the third part of the question?
How can kids avoid being compared to their parents?
Okay. I don't know if children can really avoid being compared to their parents, celebrity or not. Like, I think it's just a very common thing to see a child and be like, oh, you look like your dad, or, oh, isn't he just a little footballer like his dad? Or like, we all say these things, so I don't think it's possible to avoid that. But I think it's different when we as parents, like any of us are parents, which we're not, but if parents then don't try to allow their child to form some sort of identity outside of them and saying like, you don't have to be like me, like be yourself, and encourage them in that. But I think it's really difficult, and I think a lot of it does come down to the parents.
Yeah, I think I agree that it comes down to the upbringing. I think, being the child of a celebrity is just a territory that I will never know. I just cannot imagine how that has changed their lives. I also wonder, actually, because, I've said on the show before that how everyone, when we're growing up, we have that moment where we realize that our parents are just people. And I think for the majority of us, it's very humanizing. But I was thinking that it could be a little bit frustrating if you're the child of a celebrity. Because, as an example, I mean, Lauryn Hill's daughter spoke recently about things that like troubled her in her upbringing from her mom. And so I'm thinking, okay, she's only spoken about this now, and she's a young adult now. But when you're a child, and you're receiving a very honest version of someone who is in a position as important as motherhood, whilst that same person is then being worshipped across the globe with people who've got, her face tattooed on their arm and her poster on their wall, and they just think she's perfect. I wonder how that affects the parent-child dynamic, because the parents are already in the position of power, but then it might feel like there's this also, invisible safety net, because there's the whole world that values them, to such a high standard because of what they've created. So I just wonder if celebrity children who then go into, the arts or the entertainment industry and things like that, I wonder if they do that to kind of feel that same level of power and like shift the dynamic and maybe feel validated. But I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted the same thing as well, because sometimes you'll see like the kid of the celebrity parent want to go into the exact field that their parent went in. And I always question whether this is a true, like, this is what they wanted from their soul, this is what they wanted to do, or if they admired their parents so much they wanted to emulate their parent. Like, so I'm always on the line of that. And you guys know I watch a lot of trashy reality TV shows, right? And so one of the ones I watch is Growing Up Hip Hop, and it follows all the kids of like these famous hip hop legends, right? And so Fat Joe's son is so determined that he is going to be a rapper. Like, he is so determined. And honestly, him and Fat Joe will be in the studio, and Fat Joe's like, no, absolutely. Fat Joe's basically like, no, it's not going to work for you. It's not going to happen for you. And so they're at odds, basically. So they currently don't talk because the son, I think his name is Joey. I think he's named after Fat Joe, basically. Like, he's his junior. And he's like, my dad is hating on me. He doesn't want me to do these things, blah, blah, blah. But Fat Joe's basically like, you need to figure out what you want to do. Just because you're the son of a rapper, you shouldn't be a rapper. And so every time I watch that, I always think to myself, does he really want to be a rapper? Because sometimes I look at the music, I'm just like, I don't know if he really wants to be a rapper or if he's just doing this because he's Fat Joe's son and he thinks he should do this. And that's what the line is for me. But I can only imagine the pressure of people finding out your father or your mother is this big, huge person. And then they ask, so what do you do then? And then you have to kind of be like, because it would exactly. It wouldn't be good enough for you to say, I'm a police officer. Oh, I work admin. I do that, because they'd be like, really, with your parents that do X, Y, Z. So I can only imagine that the pressure is a lot. With Sophie, I don't think you can stop being compared to your parent, but I think you can't stop anyone being compared to anybody that they're usually in close proximity with or have a likeness to. It's just that thing, like, by nature, we just compare. That's just what we do. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Websites about it, gocompare.com, like, that's what we do. We compare. It's just in our nature to compare. I think the issue is for the person who's being compared, if you allow the constant comparison to feed into who you are and what you do, I think that's what the issue is.
Yeah. I also think it Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Amanda.
I also think it can go both ways, because I dated someone who was like a super hippie. Like, I'm talking grew the vegetables that we'd eat for dinner in their back garden and things like that. Like, the lowest maintenance person like you'll ever meet. And then the parent was a lot more materialistic. And so I think growing up in that environment, seeing their parent be materialistic and like flashy cars and like want to own businesses and want to have this and that, pushed them in the complete opposite direction. And so I think it can go one of two ways when you're like, because, you know, when you're a child, you think the first person that you look up to is your parents. The first person that gives you a reference of how to be a human being is your mum or dad, or two dads or two mums or guardian or whatever. So I understand why people think like, oh, I admire this person and I want that. And then when it comes to music, when we talk about musicians, the thing that is promoted the most is the lifestyle that they probably don't experience as often as we presume they do. People that maybe want to be rappers, maybe just want to pop 10 bottles in the club and have a couple of chains, but are people as invested in the hard work that goes into it? Because, you know, there's a couple of documentaries on Beyonce and how she creates her performances, and she works so much. I think it was like when she did Homecoming, she stopped. She like went vegan and stopped drinking and was exercising every day. And it's like, are people invested in that side of it? Do people want to go vegan and stop drinking wine? Or do you want to walk the red carpet? So I think, you know, yeah, it can go to one of two ways, to be honest.
And I was thinking that about an article that I read in Spectator magazine. It was an article online actually, and it was saying how there's a high percentage of people, famous or not, who follow their family into profession. So there's a higher proportion or more likelihood of the son of a butcher to become a butcher and the son of a doctor to become a doctor. So I think what we see with famous people is just that knock-on effect, because I guess for every child that follows their parent into it, there's probably some other children that we don't even hear of because they didn't follow their parents into it. And I was reading in the Irish Independent as well, about some of the reasons why some children might go a bit wild with famous parents. Because I think some of the things that we touched on, they were saying your parent is getting much more attention and praise than you are, which I really thought about, because I'm like, that's so true. Usually you see the parents encouraging their child, praising them, but they're like, you're in this unnatural environment where your parent is getting all this praise and attention, and also your barometer for success or what that looks like is going to be very warped, because it's like, well, being successful for my parent is being good looking and earning money and being popular and well liked. And that can put a real shift on what a child's perspective is, and they don't know who to trust, because people might be wanting to get closer to their parent. So they have all these various issues that are compounded by the fact that your parent might not take the time out to spend with you because they're trying to maintain their career. And that's not everybody. But for like Michael Douglas and his son, he was saying his son ended up in prison for like drug dealing, but like drug dealing meth, and went to prison for a few years. And Michael Douglas took the responsibility. He was just like, I wasn't around, and I wasn't there, and I wasn't present, and I think this has contributed. So I think it really brings us full circle to what we said, as it really is dependent on the parent and the upbringing.
I agree. That really made me think, oh my gosh, someone's in prison. I was just like, wow.
Yeah, I didn't know about that.
I want to ask you guys, do you guys feel like you were under pressure to like fulfill a certain path by your parents, or to follow in your parents' path?
No, not at all. I'm out here being a creative. I have like I'm very thankful that I have like the niche of parents who don't make me feel like this is a bad idea, or this is not a real job, or things like that. Like the only thing that we were told when we were growing up is that we can do anything and we can be whoever we want to be. Our ideas and our dreams were never squashed. They just always left it up to us to decide what we want to do and put our own work in. So for me, it's like everything that I've achieved, I've created that myself. I've done that from my work. I haven't had like, parents in the industry or any sort of like help. But I have had unconditional support. So yeah.
Yeah, I think for me it's a different kind of pressure, and I think it's similar. I think it's, to speak to what you said, Sophie, about it depends on the family and the background and how you were raised. Obviously, I'm first generation, right? So I'm being raised by migrant parents. So whether they wanted dreams or achievements, they just, how the world has turned out, they weren't able to do that. So I have a different kind of pressure of being able to achieve and attain things that they were never able to get. And so I'm very mindful of the privilege that I have being in this country at this point of time in history, and making sure that I'm getting everything that I should and more, because my family weren't able to. So that's what that pressure is, I think, is different.
Yeah. I think I probably feel the same way as you, Anissa. Like, I wish I had the parents who were like yours, Luanda, who were like, you can be anything, blah, blah. My parents like, you can be anything, but make sure it's academic.
Oh no!
My lead, like, they never said that, but that was the general consensus, especially from Caribbean parents, British Caribbean parents, because the idea was like, that's the way that you make sure that you're successful and that we don't have to worry about you, and that you can get on in the world and you can provide for your family. It was always very limited to Caribbean people. It's like doctor, lawyer, banker, teacher, nurse, you'll have a career for life. So when I wanted to do acting and things like that, my dad was just like, what? No. You need to study like a real job, Sophie. So I think I will definitely probably lighten the pressure on my child in that sense of being more open and saying, fulfill what you want to fulfill and do whatever you want to do, however that looks to you. But yeah, I'm really grateful. And I think that's what you're saying, Anissa. I'm really grateful for the standard that my parents did give. Like, you can do anything, and make sure you go and achieve and make the most of the opportunities that you have, because they're there to be taken.
You know what, Sophie, now that you've mentioned that, I realise that our freedom does actually come with conditions, because growing up, because now that you've talked about
I understand it, girl. I understand.
It's reminded me, because it is true, because I mean, like, I've always known what I wanted to pursue, and I've actually tried to drop drop out of school multiple occasions, and my parents were just like, no. She's always, I think, like, my parents are just saying to us that if you were to ever change your mind, that you can have this to fall back on. Like, this is the standard that you need, and then go and get whatever you want by the means that you want to get it. But this is the standard. So I tried to not do my A-levels. I tried to drop out in year 12, and I went home feeling all gangster, put on College Dropout by Kanye, the 5-year plan, and got ready for my parents to come home, and they were like, that's cute. Don't see why you can't do all of that and still do your A-levels. So you're going back to school tomorrow. And with, another one of my siblings who is pursuing sport, he's not allowed to do his athletic training unless he goes to school and has his grades to a certain level. So it's like, they are aware of what is necessary, but they also don't want to tell us what we can and can't do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think also, sense. Just to add, I think maybe you guys are also even slightly confused by my statement. They did not set me any kind of standard. I'm pretty sure if I went home and said, I want to be a ballerina, they would have said, go ahead, girl, you better do what you need to do. Like, it was never a standard, but I think, like, me having a degree, they're happy about that. Like, when they came to my graduation, they're like, rah, like, my daughter's got a degree, blah, blah. Like, they're happy about that. If I didn't want a degree, but I had a good job, they would be happy about that. If I wanted to sell Tic Tacs on the corner, they'd be there to buy the Tic Tacs. I think they're just happy that I can live and have the freedom to express myself.
I love
so
that.
maybe it's just my parents that weren't happy because the Tic Tac was a no-go. But 100%. But I think once I got my degree, my dad was kind of like, whatever you do, because you got somewhere to fall back on. So yeah. I definitely get that. Guys, I could talk to you about this all day, but we have come to the end of another episode of Ethnically Speaking. So thank you for watching and listening. Although our conversation's finished, we want to keep the conversation going with you. So do you feel like there was pressure to follow in the footsteps of your parents? Let us know your answers down below in the comments. And if you want even more of us, don't forget to sign up for access to Extra Ethnic, which is a special segment which is exclusively available to our email subscribers. If you want a summary of everything we've been talking about today, head on over to unitedmelaningroup.com/ES025. The link will be in the description. If you've been watching us on YouTube, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and of course, hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. We're going to be seeing you again the same time next week. But until then, wear a mask, wash your hands, keep your distance, and we hoping that you keep